Snow whispered against the ancient stones of Winterfell, each flake a silent herald of the North's long memory. Sansa Stark, young still, yet tempered by cruelty, exile, and treachery, stood upon the battlements in a mantle of white fox, her breath misting like ghost fire in the frigid air. Beneath her, the yard bustled with the rhythms of hard-won peace. Smiths at their forges, spearmen drilling beneath the watchful gaze of Ser Brienne, stable hands brushing shaggy northern coursers redolent of hay and cold sweat. All seemed ordinary, even comforting, until the raven arrived. Its black wings beat a staccato against the dusk sky, alighting upon the stone gargoyle beside Sansa with a croak as harsh as breaking ice. No ordinary bird, this one bore a strip of rich violet silk twined about its leg, a heraldry foreign to these snows. Maester Wolkan's thin fingers trembled when he eased the sigil free. A three-headed dragon wrought in pale jade thread, haloed by a circling direwolf embroidered in silver gray. The seal of a dream written in blood and fire. Aegon of House Targaryen, sixth of his name, if name and number held truth, had conquered Storm's End and now marched north with the Golden Company at heel. His raven spoke of just rule, of dissolving Lannister chains, of forging a realm anew beneath the twin banners of dragon and direwolf. It begged Sansa Stark to treat with him before the others, before Daenerys Stormborn sailed west with her living dragons, before Cersei's ragged crown rolled south into dust, before the night beyond the wall spread its frozen shadow upon them all. Sansa pressed the silk to her lips and tasted the faint tang of smoke. Her childhood had been spent dreaming of songs. Her womanhood had been spent escaping nightmares. Now a stranger from the south offered both caution and promise in a single span of parchment. Yet for every promise of deliverance, history whispered of burnt fields and broken oaths. Valyria's doom had birthed dragons. Winter had birthed direwolves. Perhaps, if the old world were to survive the long night foreseen in Bran's haunted eyes, fire and frost must finally clasp hands. That evening she summoned those she trusted most to the Great Hall. Lady Lyanna Mormont stood small but formidable, a cub carved in mountain stone. Ser Davos Seaworth rested wearily beside the hearth, fingers knit as though in prayer. Lord Brienne of Tartha's shadow loomed tall behind the high table, her face unreadable in the flicker of torchlight. Maester Wolkan and Lord Wyman Manderly, come north upon secret word of the Raven, completed the circle. Sansa spoke plainly, of the letter, of Aegon's claim, of the ancient history the maesters called false yet persisted in the songs of Summerhall and Blackwater. She spoke, too, of the cold vision Bran had shared with her. Ice spiders clambering over ruined keeps, blue shadows marching beneath torn banners, the wall cracking like old bone. Davos, ever practical, reminded them that dragons might well melt that frost. Lyanna's clear voice rang out that no Southron king would rule Bear Island, dragons or no. Brienne knelt, surprising all, and pledged sword and life to whatever course kept innocence from war. Maester Wolkan whispered of portent and prophecy, while Lord Wyman contemplated oaths given and oaths forsaken since Aerys's madness burned in the streets of King's Landing. Midnight found Sansa alone before the heart tree in the Godswood. Red leaves shivered while the face carved in the trunk watched with pitying sap-bleeding eyes. Sansa whispered to it of fear and hope, of lost siblings and the hush of direwolves howling across snows. She remembered Lady's gentle warmth and sudden death. She remembered Tyrion's kindness overshadowed by cruelty around them. She remembered Ramsay's dogs and Littlefinger's lies and the taste of freedom beneath an open sky. Then she turned her gaze toward the south, where a different freedom might be forged in scales and flame. 2 fortnights later, white sails broke the horizon off White Harbor, stark white but trimmed in amethyst and dusty gold. The Manderley's harbor teemed with traders hauling cod and iron, yet none mistook the foreign masts, the crimson finials catching wind like veins of garnet. Aegon VI came not with a conqueror's fleet, but with a modest dozen carracks and cogs, their hulls bristling not with siege towers but provisions. The Golden Company's elephants could not tread frozen roads, so their captains marched on boot leather alone, cloaks shimmering dull gold above tempered steel. Lord Wyman greeted them beneath White Harbor's spires of pale stone dusted in rime. Sansa rode to meet them, Brienne at her side, Jon Snow's cloak, now hers by inheritance of memory, billowing behind like a storm cloud. At first sight of her red hair in the pale sun, the Sellsword captains muttered among themselves. Crimson like the dragon's breath, yet plaited in a northern braid like molten copper turned to frost. But it was Aegon who caught her eye. He looked more Valyrian than most tales allowed. Indigo eyes beneath dark lashes, hair of soft silver gold unburdened by crown or helm. But there was something stark in his stillness as the wind knifed across the wharf. He bowed, his cloak swirling, and a hush fell among the harbor folk. Maidens marveled, sailors spat for luck, and the old gods themselves seemed to pause in their sighing branches beyond the walls. "Lady Sansa," he said, voice neither boyish nor grand, but plain as winter wheat. "I come as guest, not conqueror, though rumor gives me fiercer names." She inclined her head in turn, feeling the weight of specters watching through stone and snow. "The North remembers every rumor, Your Grace. It will judge the truth in deeds, not whispers." That first night they dined in Lord Wyman's feasting hall, where fat trout steamed upon trenchers and honeyed oat bread warmed cold fingers. Aegon spoke little, letting Jon Connington recount their passage. Storms that battered sails, Lysine corsairs that skirted too near, whispers of Daenerys' fleet anchoring in Dragonstone only days behind. Davos traded tales of smuggling onions through siege lines, drawing rare laughter from Sellswords used to counting coin by the head. Sansa listened more than she spoke, appraising the young dragon king's courtesy. Never did his gaze wander from her words to her hands. Never did he speak over the northern lords, though each graybeard towered in years above him. She noted too that when the feast waned and candles guttered, Aegon walked the ramparts alone, breathing the needle-sharp night with eyes half closed, as though scenting some music unheard. The journey to Winterfell spanned 10 days along a road carved between snow-laden pines. Golden Company outriders flanked the column, a slender banner of spears and shaggy garrons led by Ser Goldeneye Miles Toyne. Their war horses steamed as they climbed the bar Rolands. Northmen trailed behind, wary yet curious, for seldom have dragons crossed the neck in living memory. Each night Aegon's vassals pitched tents of golden cloth beneath winter stars while Sansa's retainers huddled in ring walls of wagons. Yet by the third night, after mead was shared and the ghost of a direwolf padded silent around cookfires, Northmen and Essosi alike found ease in trading songs. A Myrish fiddler strummed a lament for lost Volantis. 3 Umber lads responded with a bawdy ballad that left the Tyroshi blushing deeper than wine. On the 7th night they reached the lonely ruins of the Dreadfort, its blackened towers stark against the aurora-lit sky. There they made camp within broken walls where Ramsay Bolton once flayed men for sport. Sansa walked the courtyard alone until Aegon appeared, lantern swinging. Ash drifted on the wind like snow that could never melt. "My lady," he said gentle, "these stones hold your pain. Let them keep it, else it will follow you always." Sansa touched a pitted block where dried blood lingered in crevices beyond time's reach. Pain builds walls as strong as stone, but walls can also cage. She turned. "Tell me, Your Grace, what pain pursues the last dragon?" He did not flinch. "The death of what never lived. My family was ash long before I drew breath. I chase a phantom crown, Lady Sansa, and fear I'll grasp only smoke." They stood together in silence while the moon's pale face watched from above a shroud of broken clouds. Somewhere beyond the trees, a direwolf howled, a sound deep and mournful, yet strong. Bran awaited them upon Winterfell's ramparts, his chair carved of ancient weirwood roots draped in sable furs. Raven feathers twitched in his hair. His eyes shone distant, as though reflecting stars unseen by mortal sight. The night they arrived, he beckoned Aegon to him beneath a bower of icicles. "I have seen you in dreams," Bran murmured, voice older than his years. "A dragon of new shadow chasing an older shadow across skies of red." Aegon knelt, brow furrowed. "Tell me whose shadow I am, Lord Stark." Bran's lips curved, a sad echo of a child that once clambered over towers. "All men are shadows to the past, yet some burn brighter before they fade. He extended one pale hand to Sansa, drawing her near. And some shadows must meet to kindle dawn. John Connington bristled at talk of dreams, but Sansa commanded calm. She convened a council in the library warmed by roaring hearths. There, among dust-laden tomes, she laid bare her proposal. A pact uniting the old blood of the North to the dwindling dragonfire of Valyria, sworn upon Weirwood and Dragonbone both. Aegon would recognize northern autonomy and name Winterfell paramount protector of the realms above the neck. In exchange, the North would pledge swords, and Bran hinted, the old magic slumbering in its veins, against the armies of the dead rumored to be stirring beyond the wall. Should victory come, they would fight as one against Cersei's cruelty and Daenerys' gathering fleet, forging a realm where ice no longer warred with fire. Arguments raged for 3 days beneath vaulted rafters heavy with ravens. Some Northmen spat at bending knee to any Southron claim. Some Golden Company veterans scoffed at giving oaths to wildlings in bear fur cloaks. Yet Sansa's resolve never wavered. Aegon's courtesy never cracked. On the morn of the 4th day, turned by Bran's quiet prophecy and Davos's earnest counsel, Lord Lyanna Mormont rose upon the direwolf-carved oaken dais and spoke. Winter is here. We need allies, not ghosts. If this dragon prince will shed blood beside us, the Mormonts of Bear Island will fight at his flank. Let our foes learn that northern claws may wield southern flame. Her words broke the dam. Oaths were exchanged in roaring voices. Aegon drew a slender blade forged of pale green Valyrian steel. Frostfire, named anew for the moment, and sliced his palm. Sansa, lips set, unsheathed the ancient bronze dagger of House Stark said to have been wielded by the first king of winter. Blood kissed bronze and jade alike as they pressed hands together, scarlet mingling. That night, torches lined Winterfell's godswood. Bran muttered spells older than Westeros itself while ravens wheeled overhead. Direwolves, gray winds ghost and others unseen, circled the perimeter, eyes glowing ember red. At the ritual's climax, a hush fell so complete even the heart tree ceased its groaning. Bran spoke a name in the language of the children, a name lost in the wind. Somewhere far away, a sleeping dragon stirred, whether in a stone egg or within the bones of the earth, none could say. Fire met frost, not in battle but in trembling accord. The pact was sealed. Days passed, each thick with hidden wonders. Aegon walked the crypts and marveled at the granite kings of winter. Sansa stood beside him, torches casting dancing shadows over faces carved stern. She spoke of brothers lost. Robb struck down at the twins, Rickon at the horns of Ramsay's hounds, and Aegon listened, head bowed, as though hearing the tolling of bells in a distant city he had never seen. With spring moons came an omen. While Bran meditated in his tower, his eyes rolled white. A dragon's cry split the dawn. Far above Winterfell's highest turret streaked a shape of black-green, wings beating thunder. Regal, escaped from Dragonstone, drawn north by some invisible tide, circled thrice before alighting upon the empty godswood meadow. Pine trees bent, grass steamed. Aegon sank to one knee. The dragon regarded him with lantern-yellow eyes vast as a man's shield. It was not submission that passed between them, but recognition. Of shared blood, of ancient grief, of names lost across oceans and centuries. When Aegon rose, Regal lowered his ridged neck. Sansa watched, breath caught in her throat, as prince and dragon forged their first silent vow. The news spread like wildfire on a winter wind. A dragon perched in Winterfell, a direwolf queen at its side, an army of sellswords drilling in the Frostfang foothills, while blacksmiths at Wintertown hammered strange new arrowheads of obsidian and copper. Wildlings newly pardoned pitched tents beyond the walls, swapping tales of blue-eyed shadows. Southern ravens carried rumors that Aegon Targaryen had bent the knee to the Starks, that a red-haired witch queen flew upon Dragonback, that the world had turned upside down. Across the narrow sea, Daenerys Stormborn gnawed at her lip and wondered whose wings beat over Winterfell, if not her own. In King's Landing, Cersei clutched wine cup and map alike as the world beyond her gates conspired to render her empire of broken vows obsolete. Yet the pact of dragon and direwolf was no simple marriage of convenience. Direwolves, though few, roamed winter wastes still. Dragons, though fewer, might one day breed anew. Bran, in endless green dreams, saw a future where pups of frost fur nested beside hatchlings in dark lairs warmed by fire, where the howling of wolves heralded the approach of winged flame-bearing riders clad in steel and snow. But first, he warned, the wall would fall, and black nights would swallow dawn. Preparations began in earnest. The Golden Company taught shield wall discipline to untested wildling youths. Blacksmiths alloyed obsidian flecks into arrowheads and spear tips. Sansa and Aegon met each dawn in the Godswood to spar with words sharper than blades, testing each other's resolve, learning each other's fears. Over evenings of mulled wine, they read crumbling pages of lore together, fragments of lost Valyrian treatises on dragon husbandry, ancient Stark chronicles of pact-making with the children, songs of the last hero who walked with beasts of both flame and fur. Spring equinox blossomed beneath iron skies. Snow still drifted, but buds peeked from frozen soil, as though emboldened by the heartbeat of dragonfire in their midst. On that day, Rhaegal took flight with Aegon upon his back. No saddle, no chain, only bare fingers gripping scale ridges slick with frost melt. He soared above the wall while wildlings and Night's Watch alike gaped. From that height Aegon glimpsed the glacier rivers beyond, where pale figures like drifting bone marched southward. Their eyes glinted sapphire, their spears glittered moon-cold, and in their midst stalked creatures that no child's nightmare could match. Aegon returned trembling, yet his voice rang iron when he swore upon Rhaegal's scale. I will burn them all if I must, but the North shall not stand alone. As summer crept like a thief, Daenerys's fleet at last reached Blackwater Bay, banners snapping gold and red beneath a sea-salt sky. News reached Winterfell by Raven. The Dragon Queen had taken King's Landing after Cersei's ignoble flight, and now wore Aegon the Conqueror's circlet upon silver-braided head. Worse, Vhagar's massive form had answered her horns, making 2 dragons in her skies. War between kin dangled like a sword above an already fractured realm. Sansa faced Aegon beneath dusty rose twilight atop Winterfell's highest parapet. Far below, supper fires crackled and children chased each other under the watchful lamplight of the grooms. Aegon's hair blew pale against the dying sun. She is blood of your blood, Sansa whispered. Will you burn her as you would the dead beyond the wall? Pain pinched his brow. I would have called her sister once, but prophecies weave snarls where blood ties should bind. If she seeks to break the North beneath Dragonflame, she will find the sky contested. He turned, meeting her gaze with quiet ferocity. But tell me true, Lady of Winterfell, if I should fall, will you hold this pact? Sansa thought of Ned's steady eyes, of Robb's laughter, of Jon's steadfast oath given in the crypts. She thought of the burning of Shireen, of King's Landing's bones, of all the children lost to the fires of men's pride. Her answer came like steel drawn in moonlight. The North does not yield lightly, your grace, and neither do I. If dragons must die that children may live, then dragons shall die. But so long as one spark of honor remains, I will fight to keep it alive, even if it is born in flame. Beneath that vow, thunder rumbled. No storm, but the distant beat of wings. Rhaegal descended, talons striking stone, eyes reflecting torchlight. Beside him stood Ghost, fur silvered by moon, crimson gaze unblinking. Dragon and direwolf bowed their heads, neither beast cowed by the other, yet neither bearing fong. A pact, born of blood and blade and hope, breathed there between scales and fur. That night, the North dreamed of red sunsets ablaze with dragonfire that warmed the ice instead of scarring it, of direwolves racing beneath auroras while hatchlings trailed sparks overhead. Yet dawn brought no comfort. A raven from Eastwatch bore grim tidings of shattered ice and the dead marching beneath a new banner of frozen flame. The wall, it seemed, had cracked. In the shadow of that omen, plans coalesced with ruthless urgency. Aegon marshaled Golden Company spears and wildling skirmishers alike. Davos arranged grain wagons to feed marching columns toward the wall. Maester Wolken measured obsidian shafts by the thousand while blacksmiths quenched steel in water turned black with soot and ash. Bran lay motionless for long hours, eyes milky, roaming the weirwood network for glimpses of the enemy's path. Every hearth in Winterfell blazed with ceaseless fires, casting pillars of smoke that spiraled skyward like offerings to forgotten gods. In the quiet moments between council and command, Sansa and Aegon walked the silent halls. Once, beneath the broken tower where Bran had fallen so long ago, he asked her of marriage, not as a chain for alliances, but as a bond born of shared purpose. She answered not with words, but with a touch of her fingers to his scarred palm, where Pact blood had dried weeks before. In that silence, something deeper took root. Neither courtly love nor childhood fancy, but trust carved amidst storms. Yet the future pressed upon them like a closing fist. Daenerys's emissaries rode north demanding fealty, offering ice to extinguish. Jon Snow rode south to parley and found Dragonstone's halls grown tense with whispers of betrayal. A fleet of ironborn reavers, sworn to Yara Greyjoy, now flew Targaryen crimson to prove loyalty. They skirted the next treacherous tides bearing siege engines and fresh troops. The realm's heart beat frenzied, torn between two dragons older than its memory. But when the long night's first tendril crawled over last hearth, the Umberkeep fell silent in the space of a season. Debate ceased. Daenerys's war host, riding Drogon and Vhagar, turned north at last, their strength swelling with reach levies seeking absolution for Highgarden's ashes. Aegon's host, lean but hardened, marched from Winterfell with regal wheeling overhead, wings, casting emerald shadow over white drifts. Direwolves loped among their vanguard, silver and gray and black, their eerie howls echoing off barren mountains. Between them and the endless night lay a killing ground of frost-scoured plains and watchtowers half buried in drift. The dead advanced in silence, columns of blue-eyed wights led by skeletal horsemen upon steeds of ice. At their center thrummed a figure cloaked in storm-whirled shadow, a night king unlike any Bran had glimpsed before, crowned with antlers of rime, wielding a sword whose blade screamed in the cold. The battle that followed would fill tomes yet unwritten. Dragons clashing above sheets of black glass sky, breath of emerald and obsidian flame merging in whirls of color unseen by mortal eye. Direwolves tearing through lines of brittle bone. Great mammoths of the dead unleashing thunderous charges amidst snow maelstrom. Spear lines woven by sellswords and Northmen holding against impossible press. It was at once the forging of dawn and the dying of worlds. But those chronicles belonged to the singers, to the maesters yet unborn. For now, beneath stormlit sky, Sansa Stark and Aegon Targaryen ride side by side. Her blade lady's echo gleaming with blue runes, his frostfire keening like a memory of summer. Regal screams overhead, ghost races beneath, and the pact of dragon and direwolf crashes upon the dark tide with fury enough to wake gods asleep since the forging of the wall. Whether dawn shall break or winter shall reign eternal, none can yet say. But in this hour, heartbeats suspended between wing beats and battle drums. Hope lives, fragile as frost flowers and fierce as dragonfire, born upon two souls who once were strangers and now stand together at the edge of night. Snowdrifts whispered like secrets through the heart of the wolfswood, silver powder twirling around pine trunks dark as old iron. Torches sputtered where Aegon's vanguard advanced, the pitchy glow casting witch shadows that danced and disappeared beneath the silent boughs. Bronze bells on wildling scouts murmured soft alarms. The dead were near, creeping through the timber in columns too quiet for mortal ears. Yet for hours no wights burst from between the trees. It was as though the forest itself held its breath, waiting to see whether dragonfire or winter's chill would claim dominion. South of the vanguard, Sansa rode with the main host, armored in dull gray plate thin enough to travel yet strong enough to turn a blade. Jon Cunnington's crimson cloak streamed nearby, guarding the Golden Company's standard, a three-headed dragon crowned by a ring of direwolf teeth, and her own standard of the direwolf alone flew at equal height. That equality mattered. The soldiers saw and remembered such things. Far overhead, Regal passed and repassed, each beat of his wings a thunderous hush that bent treetops beneath invisible tides. Sometimes Ghost loped at Sansa's flank, white fur luminous against the snow, Other times the Direwolf vanished into the underbrush, an assassin for the living. By the second evening, the scouts found evidence of battle. A night's watch ranging party sprawled slain in a clearing rimmed with black frost. Their black cloaks lay shredded, their bones picked bare of flesh but strangely ungnawed. The corpses had been processed, not eaten, as if death itself had sorted through the remains. Maester Wolken bent over a fallen ranger and carved away a fragment of leather strap fused into frozen sinew. He rose, face ashen in torchlight. "There is no blood left," he whispered. "It has been drawn from them like wine from a cask." A hush rippled through the company. Sansa's knuckles tightened on the reins. Old terror stirred in memories of Ramsay's kennels, of blood spatter on snow. But she looked instead to Aegon, who knelt among the bodies and bowed his head, who whispered words in a tongue no one else understood, perhaps a prayer to gods who never built walls of ice. "Burn them," he said finally. "Their watch is ended, but their honor is not." Gray smoke curled upward, thick and oily, carrying with it a stink of charred bone that lodged behind the eyes. The men stood vigil until dawn bled over the trees in a pale ribbon of rose gold. Beneath that newborn light, Sansa reached out and took Aegon's hand. No words passed between them. None were needed. North of Eastwatch by the sea, the wall no longer looked like a fortress. Its mighty face had cracked along a meandering scar half a league long, sheer cliffs of ice shearing away as if bitten by some gargantuan maw. Where masonry remained, its blue-white grandeur glowed with sickly radiance, a lantern to guide the dead. Through that breach flowed a river of pale figures, each footstep grinding down the fallen shards to crystal dust. In their midst strode the Night King, his antler crown trailing rime that glittered like murderous starlight. Bran watched him through warged ravens, his mind perched in hundreds of tiny bodies at once. Snow blew sideways across the killing fields, scouring bone and cloth from flesh until the whites resembled brittle sculptures half-chiseled. But the Night King remained untarnished, a spear of purpose driving southward. Around him clung something Bran had only glimpsed in legends, a storm that was not wind but memory, a vortex of forgotten winters drawn into the figure that guided them. And inside that vortex, echoes of voices long dead whispered names lost to time, faint fragments of children who had knelt beneath heart trees and sworn to defend a realm that no longer remembered their faces. The visions sickened Bran, yet he pressed deeper. He followed the Night King's storm back through layers of snow-shrouded yesterdays until the swirl resolved into a single moment. A dying heart tree, its red leaves aflame under Valyrian dragonfire, its carved face weeping sap grown black. He saw children of the forest collapse in agony, felt cool stone shift beneath their tiny feet, and heard a human voice cry out above the roar of flame, "Let frost consume fire, lest fire consume us all." It was an oath, a curse, and a prophecy entwined. Bran broke free gasping. Ravens scattered, shrieking. In the real world, he sagged into Mira Reed's waiting arms, sweat beading pale against his brow. "The Night King marches not just for vengeance," he whispered. "He marches for equilibrium." Fire broke the world. Ice seeks to seal the wound. "But equilibrium will freeze the living," Mira murmured, helping him to sit upright. Bran's hand shook as he reached for quill and parchment. "We must warn Sansa," he said. "They will meet him within a fortnight if he keeps this pace." On the 15th day after leaving Winterfell, Aegon's army reached the Weeping River, its icy cataracts roaring beneath a skin of translucent ice. Beyond that ford lay the Frostfang foothills, where the dead had been sighted marauding through wildling villages. The host paused to build defenses, a palisade of sharpened logs, trenches filled with water and rimed in flammable pitch, parapets of snow tamped hard as stone. Golden Company engineers erected catapults capable of hurling barrels of wildfire that Davos, with equal parts dread and hope, had escorted north from secret caches within the broken towers of Pike. A council convened in a pavilion of woven direwolf and dragon banners. Lyanna Mormont spread her gauntlet hands atop a frost-crusted map. "Our scouts report the dead will strike before the new moon. They have no need of rest, but they pause each dusk to let their storm overtake them." a blizzard that scours the earth ahead of their march. She looked to Jon Connington. If we meet them in open field, Rhaegal's fire can burn a path. But if we wait for the blizzard, half our men will freeze before seeing combat. Connington stroked his graying beard. We must lure them into the trenches while daylight lasts. Wildfire and obsidian should cull their front ranks. Then infantry and flight will finish the rest. His eyes flicked to Sansa. But our success depends on one linchpin. Aegon must keep the Night King occupied while the rest of us whittle down his army. Silence gathered like mist. All eyes turned to Aegon, who sat at Sansa's right. He placed Frostfire upon the table. "I will fly at dawn," he said. "Rhaegal and I will drive at their vanguard before they reach the palisade. Bran's ravens will mark the Night King's position. Once seen, I will strike." He turned to Sansa. "The moment I engage, you release the wildfire along the trench. Do not hesitate, even if I am near the blast. Flame is my birthright. I will weather it." Sansa's pulse quickened. She remembered King's Landing blackened by green fire, the screams of innocence echoing in the Red Keep. "Do not dare me to burn you alive," she murmured. "I may do it." He met her stare without flinching. "Then let it be a pact within the pact. If Dragonfire must consume a dragon to save the realm, so be it." Later that night, she found him beyond the palisade, standing at the riverbank where campfires twinkled in distant rows. The river hissed beneath thin ice. Stars flared cold overhead. Rhaegal slumbered nearby, coils rising and falling like hills of emerald glass. Sansa joined Aegon in silence. "I have known fear," she told him softly. "It is a poison that tastes of iron and never truly leaves the tongue." She reached for his hand. "Tomorrow the world may end. I will not watch it end without saying this. You have become part of my north, and my north does not break." His fingers tightened over hers. "And you have become the compass of my south. Should the stars fall, my gaze will still find you in the dark." They kissed with the hush of snowflakes drifting upon water, a moment stolen from the despair of planets. When they parted, Sansa whispered words in High Valyrian Bran had taught her, words older than the freehold, born of Lyanna Stark's blood on a marriage bed of frost. Aegon shivered as though those syllables had opened some ancestral gate. He bowed his head. "Tomorrow, then," he said. Dawn unfolded like a wounded rose, pink petals bleeding into gray, horns brayed. Men scrambled along ramparts dusting last night's snow from helms. Barrels of wildfire, sealed tight beneath iron bands, were hoisted into catapult buckets. Obsidian arrowheads glinted black against rawhide bowstrings. In the sky, Bran's ravens emerged as an obsidian cloud, swirling above the trenches before fanning out toward the horizon. Sansa rode the line on a dapple gray courser, her voice ringing clear, "Hold fast. Remember your brothers and sisters. Remember the hearths at your backs. The dead forget. We remember." Her last word crashed against shields like a hammer on bronze, and the host took it up. "Remember, remember, the North remembers." Then the storm came. A low rumble tremored across the frozen ground, as though some impossible drumbeat beneath the crust of the earth. Snow darkened, drawn skyward into a churning wall of white that devoured the trees. Within that wall flickered points of sapphire flame, eyes of the dead reflecting false daylight. Banners snapped, you could hear cloth ripping, and then silence fell, deep enough to swallow breath. Out of the silence thundered Rhaegal, wings ablaze with dawnlight, Aegon straddling the dragon's neck like a living lance. Frost drifted from his silver hair, steam twirled off Rhaegal's scales. The dragon banked low above the trench. At Sansa's signal, green fire hurled upward in arcs that traced emerald serpents through the air, smashing into the leading ranks of whites. Wildfire clung to bone and rotten leather. It poured between ribs, erupting from gaping jaws. Where fire met storm, steam hissed like demons screaming. The trench ignited end to end, a wall of green inferno. Yet beyond that wall the dead pressed forward without pause, stepping through companions already falling to ash. Aegon leaned into Rhaegal's dive, unleashed a torrent of orange-white flame that vaporized the nearest corpses. He banked again, and Sansa glimpsed his face. Fierce, exultant, terrible. This was not the boy prince she had met in White Harbor. This was Dragon's heir triumphant, wedded in heat and fury to his mount. Then Bran's ravens screamed as one. Through their chorus echoed Bran's voice. No longer a boy's, but the timber of root and stone. The Night King is among the charred pines, 200 paces north of the river fork. He rides alone. Strike now. Aegon did not hesitate. Rhaegal launched skyward with the boom of titanic drums, folding wings then snapping them open to claw the air. Ice shattered under the downdraft as they rose above the blizzard wall. The Night King came into view, a solitary figure upon an undead elk, antler racks of ice curling skyward, cloak trailing threads of hoarfrost that danced like spider silk. He looked up, their gazes locked across a gulf of 10,000 winters. And then Rhaegal screamed, a challenge older than mankind. Dragonfire plunged, a pillar of living sun slicing downward. The Night King lifted one hand. The storm curved to him like a lover, wrapping him in swirling plates of snow. Fire hit, exploded, roared. For a breath the earth seemed to melt. But when the blast faded, the figure still sat astride his elk, cloak ablaze yet unsinged, eyes twin stars of absolute cold. He raised his spear, a length of blanch-white crystal, and hurled it. The spear pierced sky in a streak of moonlight. It struck Rhaegal in the left wing, shearing through membrane and bone. The dragon shrieked, pitching sideways. Aegon clung, muscles straining, but a second spear burst from the Night King's fist and tore through the dragon's shoulder. Rhaegal spiraled. Aegon slid, scarcely catching hold of a ridge scale. Wind howled. Sansa watched in horror as dragon and rider tumbled from the heavens, smashing through the blizzard into a stand of black pines with a crash that cracked the earth. The dead surged, emboldened. They poured through weak points in the palisade, their storm freezing wildfire traces into brittle emerald glass. Brienne met them at the line, Oathkeeper slashing arcs of Valyrian steel that burst whites into showers of hoarfrost. Lyanna Mormont leapt from a parapet onto the back of a skeletal giant, plunging her obsidian spear through its spine. The giant bellowed, collapsing upon itself in a heap of shattered bone. Sansa rode toward the fallen dragon, heart hammering. Jon Connington and 200 Golden Company veterans flanked her, cutting a narrow wedge through wights that clawed at their horses' bellies. Rhaegal lay curled amid broken trunks, green blood steaming in rivulets that sizzled upon snow. Aegon struggled to rise beside the dragon's massive skull, helm cracked, hair matted with blood. When he saw Sansa, he shouted, but his voice drowned beneath a new, terrible roar from the sky. Drogon, 90 yards of incandescent muscle, black wings shredding clouds. Upon his back, Daenerys Stormborn wore battle armor of scaled black and points of red fire. Behind her, on lesser dragons, young but lethal, swooped a handful of Targaryen loyalists from Essos. And at her left flank, colossal and terrible, glided Vhagar, her bronze belly glowing as if molten. Spark blue joy ignited in some throats, terror in others. But Drogon did not circle overhead in greeting. He stooped, exhaled a lance of liquid fire that hammered the Night King. Flames splashed in sheets. Whites ignited. The blizzard fractured. But when the inferno cleared, the Night King stood unburned, cloak now flickering green with stolen wildfire. He extended both arms. The blizzard collapsed into twin cyclones that raced skyward, coiling around Drogon and Vhagar. Ice rimed the dragon's wings. Their flames sputtered. Daenerys shouted in Dothraki, urging Drogon higher, but his left wing stiffened, frost forming webs across leathern membrane, and he stalled. Meanwhile, Sansa dismounted at Rhaegal's side. Aegon gripped her wrist, his features blood-speckled but eyes unwavering. "Help me to my feet," he gasped. She hauled him up. "Frostfire," he hissed, searching the snow, then found the sword half buried in slush. He swayed, she grabbed his elbow. The Night King began to walk toward them, each footstep freezing the ground into perfect mirrors. Whites parted around him, reforming in his wake. His elk clattered behind, hooves cracking the icy topsoil. 20 paces, 15. He raised a third spear. Regal roared despite his wounds, heaving onto forelimbs. Aegon staggered forward, placing one hand upon the dragon's bloody snout. "With me," he whispered. He climbed the undamaged foreleg, hauling himself onto the shoulder where muscle still rippled beneath torn scale. Sansa tried to join, but Regal lurched, wings flapping ragged. Gusts slammed her backward. She saw the Night King draw back the spear. The world shrank to that glittering point. A howl split. The Din Ghost lunged, clamping his jaws on the Night King's right arm. The spear wavered, its tip grazing Regal's chest instead of heart. That slight miss saved the dragon's life. Ghost flew aside, hurled by a backhand that would have shattered granite. The Direwolf hit a snowbank and did not rise. Aegon lifted Frostfire overhead. Regal beat his wings, throwing off snow and ash. With agonizing motion, the dragon rose, lopsided but aloft. Aegon angled toward the Night King, mouth open in a roar to rival beasts. The Night King lifted his uninjured arm to the sky. Frost gathered. He closed his fist, and instantaneously hundreds of corpses strewn across the battlefield jerked upright, eyes blazing blue. Among them the fresh dead, Northmen, Sellswords, wildlings. They rose with blades still in hand, turning toward their living kin. Chaos erupted. Brienne's shield rang under an axe wielded by a Northman she had drilled with only yesterday. Davos plunged a flaming brand into the face of a squire whose name he had never learned. The trenches, once defensive walls, now penned the living in with their fallen comrades resurrected to slaughter them. Above, Daenerys watched in horror. She wheeled Drogon alongside Regal, shouting across the gulf. But her voice lost itself in shrieking wind. Aegon met her gaze. The two Targaryens, half-siblings or cousins or rivals or all, shared a single moment of reciprocal grief. Then Aegon pointed Frostfire at the Night King, and Daenerys understood. Together they dove. Drogon and Regal formed a V that shredded the blizzard, flame and frost colliding in a kaleidoscope of color. The Night King whirled, raising both arms. The cyclones spun faster, shredding torchlight, bending trees. Regal's flame flickered. Drogon's broadened into a cone that engulfed whites, palisades, even wildfire that still burned in green pockets. Heat scorched the air. Snow sublimated into steam. The battlefield vanished behind a veil of roiling vapor. Sansa, dazed, forced herself to rise. Ghost shook off snow and limped to her side. She saw the Night King, silhouette trembling within that veil. She saw Aegon hurtle from the mist, Regal's battered form clawing. Frostfire thrust like a comet toward the Night King's chest. Steel met crystal. A thunderclap rang so loud men dropped weapons, clutching ears. The Night King staggered, antler crown fracturing under force. Blue light pulsed along spear and sword alike. Aegon screamed. Frostfire cracked from hilt to tip, but the sword did not break. The Night King's spear fractured instead, shards cascading like shattered starlight. His crown crumbled. A low moan echoed from every wight at once. Something vast and invisible tore in two. Yet the Night King did not fall. He whispered a word older than cities, and ice poured from his palms, wrapping Aegon's torso like bands of quicksilver. The prince convulsed, glaze forming on his armor, breath icing mid-exhale. Regal shrieked. Sansa ran, leaping over corpses stiff as planks, Ghost at her heels. She reached the scene as Aegon slipped from Regal's back. Ice snagged upon wing membrane, dragging the dragon earthward again. Sansa drew Lady's Echo, the bronze-runed blade Bran had given her, and charged. The Night King turned toward her. His eyes flared a question, or perhaps he recognized her from Bran's visions, child of Winterfell who shaped fates. He extended a hand. An arrow of dragon glass thudded into his chest. Lyanna Mormont stood 30 yards off atop a mound of corpses. Bow in hand, another arrow knocked. North remembers, she hissed, and loosed again. The second arrow struck the Night King's left shoulder, spinning him like a top. He staggered, blue light sputtering. Sansa closed, She swung Lady's Echo in a diagonal cut aimed at the Night King's neck. The blade bit but stopped, half buried in ice armor. The Night King grasped it, frost racing along the bronze. The sword began to crack. Distant horns sounded. From the south rode a roar of hoofbeats. The Knights of the Vale, led by Jon Royce and Rabar Royce, silver moon and falcon standards flashing. Flanking them galloped Baratheon banners. Gendry in blackened steel bearing the crowned stag, come by secret raven after forging alliance with Davos. And in their wake thundered the remaining free folk, Tormund Giantsbane's booming laughter carrying across snow as he cut down wights astride a great shaggy elk. The living tide smashed into undead ranks, carving relief for battered trenches. Gendry's war hammer of castle-forged steel shattered skulls. Jon's spiked mace drove bodies into mud. Tormund flung himself from his elk onto a white walker, wrestling the icy fiend until Dragonglass dagger found the creature's throat, spraying shards like snowflakes. The Night King snarled. Sansa felt the vibration more than heard it, and yanked Lady's Echo from her grasp. He raised the sword against her. She braced for the blow, but Bran's voice thundered in her mind. Steel that remembers fire can never freeze. Bronze runes ignited along the blade, flaring molten orange. The Night King jerked, as though scalded. Lady's Echo erupted in flame, bronze turning incandescent. The Night King's fingers blistered, skin cracked, frost armor liquefied into steam. He dropped the blade with a hiss like quenched iron and staggered back, blue light in his eyes flickering. Aegon broke free of the ice bands, lunging despite shattered armor. He drove the broken stump of Frostfire's blade into the Night King's abdomen. This time the crystal armor did not hold. The stump pierced. Aegon shoved deeper. Cracks raced along the Night King's torso, lightning across dark glass. He reached to wrench the sword out, but a shadow crashed into him. Ghost, jaws locking on the Night King's wrist. The Wargwolf's eyes burned scarlet. His teeth sank through ancient flesh with a crunch like splintering ice. The Night King shrieked, an inhuman keen that ripped clouds apart. His form fractured along lines of glowing blue. Wind died. The blizzard collapsed. Every wight on the field froze in mid-motion, head cocked as though listening. Then the Night King exploded into a storm of rime and shards, blue fire consuming itself. The wights collapsed, empty marionettes. Silence. Snow drifted, indifferent. Sansa knelt beside Aegon, who sagged against Rhaegal's massive limb. His eyes were glassy with shock. Frost painted his cheeks. She pressed her forehead to his. "Breathe," she whispered, though her own breath shuddered. "Breathe, your grace." Daenerys landed Drogon nearby, sliding down with plate clattering. She looked upon Aegon and Sansa, on the shattered spear, the steaming sword, the unmoving wights, and her eyes filled with something like awe, something like dread. Drogon strode forward and nudged Rhaegal, who answered with a weak rumble. Dragons mourned in guttural harmony. Around them the living host stirred, dazed. Brienne limped, armor dented but resilient. Davos removed his helm with shaking hands. Lyanna Mormont wiped blood from her brow, already barking orders to gather wounded. Tormund roared triumph until wildling and Northmen alike echoed him in primal cheer. But victory sang with dissonant chords. Where the Night King's body had been, only shards of crystal remained, faintly luminescent. Bran's ravens ringed those shards in a perfect circle, cawing a dirge. Bran himself, miles away, collapsed into fresh snow, tears streaking his cheeks though no one saw. Night fell, clear and starbright. Fires dotted the encampment, each one a small sun around which survivors huddled. Dead were burned or buried, depending on custom. Lady's Echo lay across Sansa's knees as she sat beside Aegon in a healer's tent. Maester Wolkan had stitched the gash on Aegon's side, packed it with warmed honey and woundwort. The prince slept now, breath slow. Ghost sprawled at his feet, rib cage rising and falling in exhausted rhythm. Daenerys entered quietly, cloak of black-red feathers whispering. She stood at the foot of Aegon's cot for a long while before speaking. "He is your future," she said. Sansa looked up, expression unreadable. And yours? Daenerys's lips trembled. I do not know. I came seeking to end a war between claims, only to find a war against oblivion. Perhaps I have fought the wrong battles. Sansa rose, sheathing Lady's echo. We all fought the wrong battles once. Now we must choose whether to learn from them. Daenerys studied her, eyes older than youth allowed. When he wakes, I will kneel to him, she said. Not because I have lost, but because I have found what I sought. A realm that can stand after fire and ice have broken against it. She hesitated. Will the North accept me if I bend the knee? Sansa placed a hand upon Daenerys's armored shoulder. The North remembers kindness, too. Kneel, fight beside us, and one day you may see children playing beneath skies free of blizzard and flame alike. Daenerys nodded, a slow and solemn bow. Outside, the aurora shimmered in green and rose ribbons. 2 dragons, one black, one green, circled each other above the weeping river, wings catching starlight. Below them, ghostly direwolves prowled the perimeter, guardians of the night. A pact forged in dragonfire and direwolf blood had held. The long night had been broken, yet dawn's fragile light would reveal a realm scarred by both salvation and loss. And in that dawn, rulers must decide whether they would mend those scars, or carve new ones in pursuit of crowns. But for this one night, the living breathed warm air tinged with wood smoke and hope. Sansa Stark left the tent and walked to the river's edge, where ice still hissed against slow water. She knelt, palms touching the frigid surface. Father, she whispered. Rob, Mother, Arya, Bran, Jon, Rickon, Lady, each name a beat in her heart. I have kept faith. Winter is not yet done, but spring will come. On my honor. A twig snapped behind her. Aegon limped forth, cloak drawn tight. He knelt beside her without speaking. Together they watched the water slide beneath ice, silent and unstoppable, carrying winter's story toward seas yet unfrozen. Above them the stars burned, distant yet constant. And somewhere deep within the earth, beneath roots of heart trees and bones of ancient direwolves, the fire of prophecy flickered, no longer a ravenous blaze, but a hearth flame waiting for tomorrow's dawn. Ash settled over the weeping river encampment like fine gray talc, softening the stark bones of the battlefield into a haunted tableau. Fires guttered low in iron braziers, guarded by solemn figures whose eyes still searched the dark for specters long since fallen silent. Wolves, real and spectral, paced the perimeter, their paws soundless on trampled snow. Overhead, the twin dragons glided in weary circuits, their shadows' great wings drifting across the moon-silvered ice. Within the healer's ridgepole tent the air lay thick with tincture and boiled pine resin. Aegon Targaryen rested upon a cot of spruce boughs, green blood from Regal caking his mail like oxidized verdigris. Beside him Sansa Stark sat cross-legged, mending the prince's torn sleeve with needle and raw silk thread. Each stitch felt like a heartbeat claimed back from death's ledger. Each knot tied was a silent vow that the pact would outlive the night. A gust parted the hide flap. Bran Stark entered, borne in a wicker chair slung between 2 lanky free folk youths. Beneath the wolf pelt across his lap, he looked smaller than Sansa remembered, a sapling stripped by storm yet clinging fast. His eyes, storm-pale, rimmed in shadows, gleamed with the dreams of other ages. She rose and kissed his brow. "Brother," she whispered. Bran's gaze drifted to Aegon, who stirred but did not wake. "Threads are loosening," Bran said, voice thin as frost on glass. "Cut one enemy from the weave and new knots slip loose. We have burned the Night King's glyph from the world, but the wound beneath still bleeds prophecy." Sansa's needle paused. "Speak plainly, Bran." "The children forged him to cage dragonfire within winter's claws," Bran murmured. "That cage is shattered, but the fire remains, unbound, unfearing. Dragons will breed again, and the balance will shift until ice carves new chains. Aegon and Daenerys may think dawn is theirs to shepherd, yet dawn is fickle. It can birth a harsher noon." Outside, hoofs clattered. Davos Seaworth shouldered through, face creased with fresh worry. "Riders from the south," he rasped. "Lord Garland Tyrell and Lady Asha Greyjoy. They carry banners of truce but sit uneasy in their saddles." Sansa fixed the last stitch, rose and drew her cloak. "Bran, stay with him," she murmured, resting a hand on Aegon's brow once more. He slept on, breath shallow. The parley took place beneath the shattered eaves of a burnt pine, its charcoaled limbs clawing the sky like a giant's blackened ribs. Garland Tyrell wore emerald plate etched in golden vines. Asha Greyjoy sported seal leather trimmed in silver studs, one hand seldom straying from the cutlass at her belt. Beyond them, ranks of Tyrell and Ironborn stood side by side, unlikely companions, bound by rumor of dragons and dawn. Sansa dismounted, Brienne and Lyanna Mormont flanking her. "You come far for words," she greeted, voice calm. Garland inclined his helm. "Highgarden stands fractured." Queen Cersei fled west with her lions, leaving only ashes and debts. The Reach will not kneel again to empty promises. We followed Daenerys north, seeking salvation, yet the harvest we found was fire and corpses animated by sorcery. Asha spat into the snow. "And I followed the Dragon Queen because the old ways craved flame, not frost. Yet I saw my deckhands turned blue-eyed thralls. That debt is paid." She met Sansa's gaze. "Word is the Wolf's Girl and the Silver Prince have struck the frost to Flinders. If true, the world is born anew, and new births need midwives." Sansa folded her gloved hands. "If you seek alliance, speak it plain. We have bled too deep for riddles." Garland drew a parchment, its wax seal bearing the sigil of a crowned rose entwined with a direwolf. "I drafted this in the Queen's sight before she bent the knee to your prince. Highgarden will pledge harvest for 3 winters. Grain, cider, seed, and 1,000 greencloak archers to guard the neck. In return, we ask recognition of the Reach's right to govern itself, and a seat at whatever council forges the laws of dawn." Asha stepped forward. "And Pike pledges ships and saltwives enough to ferry armies where roads fail, plus iron and pitch to rebuild fallen keeps. In return, we claim the Northern Isles as vassals of the Seastone Chair, outside the Reach's grasp and free from old Lannister tariffs." Brienne's blue eyes narrowed. "You speak as though Aegon were already king." Garland offered a wry smile. "I saw him pierce the heart of winter. Does any other crown claim such feat?" Sansa breathed deep. The cold tasted like iron again. "No other crown," she conceded. "Yet crowns weigh heavy." She unrolled the parchment, studying lines inked with deft, dancer-like script. "I will bring this to Aegon and Daenerys both. But know this, the North remembers every promise, and it remembers every betrayal twice as keenly. Highgarden once turned its back when Robb Stark sought passage. The Ironborn once sacked Winterfell and slew children in their beds. The ledger is long." Garland bowed. "Then let remembrance guide mercy." Asha smirked. "And let mercy water vengeance down to ale." They departed under escort, their retinues fading into the silver-gray horizon. Sansa lingered, eyes drifting to the charred trunk above. On its blackened bark, frost crystals formed fleeting runes. Her mind shaped them into words. Trust yields roots. Roots bind earth. Earth drinks blood. She shivered, pulling her cloak tight. Aegon woke in mid-afternoon, a willow warbler's song threading through hide walls. Bran sat nearby, fingers woven together, eyes half closed. Aegon's throat rasped. "Brother of winter," he said, voice cracked. "Do ravens still wheel?" "There are fewer," Bran returned softly, "but they still watch." Aegon pushed upright, pain flaring along his ribs. "Sansa, parleying with roses and krakens. She will return." Bran's gaze drifted to the tense smoke hole. "Will you crown yourself when she does?" Aegon's breath caught. He glanced at his hands. Nails rhymed faint silver from Frostbite's kiss. "I thought a crown was burden enough," he murmured. "But I heard winter's heart crack under my blade, and for a moment I felt the weight of every life born from that shattering. A man who would bear a crown must first bear that sound forever." Bran smiled, wistful, almost kind. The world is louder than any one heart, yet hearts are where worlds begin. Hoofbeats clattered outside. Sansa slipped through with Brienne behind, snow sparkling upon her crimson hair. She knelt at Aegon's cot. He caught her hand, relief softening both faces at once. She laid the drafted treaty across his lap. "The Reach and Iron Isles court our dawn," she said. "They come with gifts and debts owed to ghosts." Aegon scanned the parchment slowly. "Highgarden's granaries will spare thousands the hunger spring," he said. "Yet Pike's pitch will burn as easily as it builds." "We must choose," Sansa murmured. "Refuse them and risk embers sparking new wars. Accept and bind ourselves to memories few forgive. The Pact of Dragon and Direwolf extends beyond two hearts now. It binds every soul beneath these skies." Aegon's fingers brushed her stitches. "Then let our pact become a loom. We will weave each banner into one cloth, lest winter's echo return." She bent, touched her brow to his. "Stand, then. Stitch your flesh as I stitched your sleeve, and wear the dawn with me." 3 days later, the sky broke bright as hammered steel. Clouds fled by a brisk western wind smelling faintly of salt. Before the breached wall's ragged maw, the combined host gathered, Northmen in patched furs, Reach archers clad emerald, Ironborn pikes crested with salt spray, wildlings draped in wolf hides, dragons perched upon ice spurs, their scales glinting like dusk-forged mail. Direwolves prowled the flanks, hackles bristling at memories no living man could fathom. A stage of oak planks edged by weighted stones rose at the wall foot. Upon it stood a slender anvil of black iron, forged overnight by the camp smiths from melted weapons of fallen foes. Rhaegal approached first, wings mantling. From his jaws he laid a chunk of star iron, a meteorite unearthed deep beneath Winterfell's crypt, gifted by Bran, on the anvil's face. Then Drogon lumbered forward, Daenerys astride in black-red armor. She dismounted lightly, nodding to Aegon across the anvil. He wore new mail of silvered rings, the minimal circlet of twisted Valyrian steel Davos had salvaged from dragonbone shards. Ghost padded at his heel. Sansa walked to his other side, Lady's echo sheathed across her back, bronze runes faintly aglow. Maester Wolkan spoke first, voice carrying far. "By will of the living gathered, the Pact of Dragon and Direwolf is sealed in the forging of dawn." He threw a pouch of wildfire powder upon the star iron. Green sparks leapt skyward. Aegon drew Frostfire's surviving shard, its edge quenched black. Daenerys drew the wing hilts of her twin Arrachs, Valyrian steel gifted by Karth. Together they hammered the heated star iron, blow for blow, sparks geysering in silver and green fountains. The clangs echoed through the breach, reverberating among distant ice cliffs like chimes. Each strike melted sliver into sliver, forging a blade long as a man's leg, half dragonglass black, half dawn metal bright. When the last hammer rose, Aegon and Daenerys laid their blades aside. Sansa stepped forward, lifting the newborn sword, a river of night and sunrise interwoven, mirrored edge winking with promise. "These flames have eaten kings and beggars alike," she said, voice resonant. "May this blade guard them both." She offered it to Aegon. He accepted, turned to Daenerys. For a heartbeat, ancient grief flickered between them, but he knelt and presented the sword horizontally. A bridge. She laid her palm atop it. Her other hand rested on his. Sansa placed hers over theirs, 3 hands clasped on day-forged metal, and Bran, borne forward in his chair, stretched brittle fingers to touch the blade's spine. A hush swallowed wind, voice, even dragon's breath. A silence so absolute the heartbeat of the world seemed to pause. Bran spoke. "Ice was broken, fire untamed. Let balance be forged. I name this blade Elleries, Seam of Dawn." Blue sparks danced along the edge. Frost condensed, then evaporated. Dragons exhaled. Direwolves howled. Across the host, men sank to one knee, weapons grounded, brows bared to wind. Aegon rose, turned to them. "We have outlived the long night," he called. "Not by crown nor conquest, but by covenant. No throne forged of swords shall rule this dawn. No single voice shall drown the chorus. I swear before gods old and new to stand as ward of this balance. Nothing more, nothing less. Will you stand beside me? Shouts rose. Northmen first, then Tyrell archers, then Ironborn, free folk, even Dornish outriders newly arrived. A thunder of ascent rolled down the frozen valley, into the broken shadow of the wall. Daenerys lifted her rocks. And I swear dragonfire shall temper, not consume. No city shall burn that we can spare. No child shall starve while granaries overflow. Let this be the age not of my right, but of our making. Sansa drew Lady's echo, bronze runes blazing anew. And I swear the North shall remember these vows when summer returns and memory grows soft. Should either break faith, our wolves will howl until justice hears. At that the crowd roared, a living wave cresting against ruined ice. Above, dawn finally breached the eastern crest, lancing through the breach to paint shattered blocks with molten gold. Elleries caught the light and threw it skyward. Dragons turned their necks, bathing in heat long absent. That night Sansa found herself atop an ice shelf overlooking the camp, cloak whipped by stiff breezes scented of salt and brine. The shivering sea lay north, beckoning. Footfalls approached. She angled her head to see Daenerys, cheeks ruddy from wind, silver hair unbound. "Does it feel like victory?" Daenerys asked, settling beside her. "It feels like standing on a cliff with summer seas below," Sansa replied. "Beautiful, but the leap kills many." Daenerys traced a rune chipped into the ice. "I thought Flame L. One could save the world. You taught me frost remembers. Perhaps between remembering and burning we may yet sow." Sansa smiled softly. "The sowing is hardest when the ground is frostbitten, but seeds can lie dormant years before sprouting. Will your seeds accept a foreign queen? They will accept deeds, not words." Sansa turned. "Help us rebuild Last Hearth, feed widowed clans, mend the walls wound with stone and dragon's glass. They will judge that louder than any coronation." The dragon queen's breath plumed pale. "Then we begin at sunrise." They stood in companionable hush until Regal's croon echoed up from the valley, answered by Drogon's baritone. Two dragons, once divided by lineage, conversed in old songs. Far below, campfires glimmered like constellations inverted, each a promise the darkness could be endured. Weeks unfurled into a measured tide. Wounds knit beneath poultices of sage and pine tar. Shattered helms were reforged into plowshares. Wildlings taught reachmen the art of smoking mammoth meat, while Tyrell healers brewed mulled willow bark to treat frostlung among freefolk children. Smithies rang day and night, casting blades of dragonglass set into ashwood spears for rangers tasked with patrolling north of the wall. And upon the plains before Winterfell new paddocks rose, vast half-moon pens of timber lined with iron columns, nurseries not for sheep, but for dragons. Yet not all wounds craved salve. At dusk one crisp first-bloom evening, Sansa walked the God's Wood, needles budding bright red tips like blood reborn. She found Aegon kneeling before the heart tree, eyes closed. In his hands he held Elleries. Its quenched steel edge shimmered where sun shafts pierced the branches. "You sought counsel with the old gods," she said, stepping beside. He opened his eyes. "I asked if a man can bear two worlds in one breast. I was born in shadow, raised by exiles, taught to claim the realm in which my family burned. Yet here, under these leaves, I feel as though ice were born beneath my skin." Sansa laid a palm on rough bark. "Winterfell reshapes all who linger, even dragons." She regarded him. "Do you regret forging the blade?" "Regret?" He shook his head. "This sword bears both our realms. I only fear I will fail its balance." She smiled. "Then fear will keep you honest." She traced a rune near his fingers. The heart tree's face watched me steal moments of courage as a girl trapped in a gilded cage. It watched me bleed upon snow, yet never once did those eyes close. "If you falter, they will remind you, and I will remind you." He exhaled, relief softening the drag of fatigue. "Then stand with me tomorrow, at the council hall we raise upon this field, when I pledge that no throne of sharpened steel shall rule again. We will craft a ring of seats, each carved from wood of realms old and new. And at the center, Elleries shall rest. Reminder that dawn is forged, not granted. Sansa's smile widened. A flicker of the child she once was beneath the ramparts with Arya and Bran. I will stand, she said. Far off, blacksmiths' hammers rang. Children shouted at play with direwolf pups chasing their heels. Somewhere in the kennel ghost bayed. His song was answered by Regal's rumbling croon. Overhead the sky glowed lavender, first star blinking awake. Sansa and Aegon stood shoulder to shoulder before the weirwood, its leaves rustling like pages turning to a chapter uninked. They did not know the perils yet woven in that blank parchment. How Iron Isle's captains might chafe at treaties, how southern lords might whisper for old crowns, how dragons might clutch eggs and hunger for skies too small. Nor did they pretend dawn would banish night forever. But in that hush, rooted in earth older than kings and kissed by wind older than prophecy, they felt certainty bloom. That winter's wound could heal, that dragons might guard, not scourge. That the North could remember without needing to avenge. That pact, once forged in direwolf blood and dragonfire, could weave a future no song had yet conceived. Night deepened, violet yielding to blue-black. Ser Brienne's lantern bobbed at the Godswood gate, waiting. Sansa slipped her hand into Aegon's. Together they walked toward the light, leaving behind the face in the tree. Its red eyes gleaming, mouth carved in an ageless smile as though even the old gods, bleak and patient, acknowledged that for all the ice and fire and loss, tomorrow would rise. Moonless clouds cloaked the sky above Winterfell, yet the icy fields beyond the walls gleamed with pale reflection from forge fires, braziers, and the restless glow of dragons' throats as they slept. Night work had become routine, masons shaping blackstone blocks for a new watchtower beside the wall's breach, bronze-browed smiths tempering spearheads of dragonglass, scribes laboring by tallow candles to copy treaties in triplicate. Stillness had become rare, but on this night Sansa Stark found a pocket of quiet in the rookery where ravens dozed upon oak perches and moon-eyed owls blinked from rafters. She wrote by lamplight, quill gliding over parchment. A letter to Arya, wherever wind or water carried her, telling of the Pact, of dragons perch circling their rebuilt pens, of ghosts healing ribs. She wrote not as Lady of Winterfell nor as Regent of the Dawn Council, but as a sister who missed the rasp of a younger wolf's laughter. When she sealed the letter with direwolf wax, she felt the tug of memory so sharp she closed her eyes against tears and smelled again the lemon cakes of childhood. A scuff of boots. Davos Seaworth entered, cowl pulled tight. Steel catch your ships at the White Knife, he murmured. Fly unfamiliar banners. 9-spoked will broken in 3. Sansa rolled the sigil on her tongue, tasting dread. Carcosa or the Ebon Brotherhood? Davos shrugged. Either way, emissaries demand audience. They claim to bring debt notes issued by the Iron Bank, purchased at half price after Cersei fled. They mean to levy repayment in dragons if rumor holds. Sansa's heart clenched. Aegon slept wounded. Daenerys was 3 days gone patrolling broken villages with Regal and Drogon. A fractious council could fracture further under the weight of foreign creditors. Stall them, she said. Invite their factor to supper. Salt and bread will bind them peaceful at least one night. Davos dipped his head. I'll speak with the kitchens. He paused at the threshold. Milady, Asha Greyjoy and Tormund quarrel at the East Gate, over who commands salvage of dead giants' bones. Might need more than bread to keep those two civil. Sansa managed a tired smile. Tell them the bones belong to the realm. If they wish trophies, I will grant each a finger joint once we count the cost in pyres. Davos's chuckle was rough but warm. He left. Sansa lingered until the candles guttered, then descended to the courtyard. Snow drifted soft, dusting half-built parapets like powdered sugar. Lamplight shimmered off her mail. The wind carried the tang of molten slag and old blood. She stopped beneath the rebuilt broken tower, now renamed Dawnspire at Aegon's insistence, and watched its stone skeleton climb night by night toward the stars. Master Mason swore it would rival the high tower's lantern when finished, lit by green mirrored glass that would reflect sunrise across the northern plain. A flick of movement. Bran, wheeled by Mira, rolled from an archway. His gaze wandered skyward. "Comets thread the upper dark," he murmured. "Two tails this season, bending toward each other like blades." Sansa smoothed a fur over his lap. "Is that omen ill or bright?" "Neither," Bran said. "Comets are questions. Our answers give them meaning." He turned his head, pupils glazed as though he watched another place. "I dreamt last eve of deep-sea chimneys far north, where blind fish swarm stone arches warmed by magma. The sea floor cracked, birthing heat in the kingdom of cold. The world births paradoxes, sister." Sansa accepted the riddle, for Bran seldom parted with plainer truths. She kissed his temple and left him to the night. By dawn's thin pink, tension clasped Winterfell like an iron vice. Word of Iron Bank collectors trickled through the camp. Tyrell levies muttered about forced levies they thought buried. Ironborn boasted of repelling any banker's claws. At midday council bells rang. The great hall smelled of pine tar and beeswax, banners of all 7 kingdoms hanging side by side. At the high table Aegon sat pale but upright, ribs bandaged beneath black leather doublet, Elleries sheathed at his back. Daenerys, fresh returned, stood to his left, white braids gleaming. Sansa claimed her place on the right, ladies' echo at her hip. Bran sat upon a carved weirwood dais behind them, eyes half closed as if listening to more than debate. The Iron Bank's factor proved a gaunt woman in indigo robes, eyes sharp as counting knives. "Sirs and ladies," she began without bow, "King Robert's debts, King Joffrey's debts, and debt of one styling herself Queen Cersei Lannister come now to 3 million golden dragons and 20,000 trade bars of silver. You claim a realm reborn. Debts do not rebirth. They endure." A hush fell, broken by Tormund's barked laugh. "Gold tokens? We cracked the Night King's skull and you bleat for coin." The factor raised one eyebrow. 3 million dragons will rebuild 20 walls, feed 10 winters, arm 5 armies. Our ledgers state you cannot do these things without us. We offer terms, payable by ceding exclusive mining rights to dragonglass veins that your scholars map beneath Skagos and Hardhome. Further equity in future dragon eggs at 2 per clutch. First lien. The hall erupted. Roars, oaths, slamming cups. Lyanna Mormont rose on her bench like a cub bristling. "Touch our shores and we'll take your fingers in lieu of coin," she shouted, tiny fist shaking. Aegon motioned for calm, but before he spoke, Bran's voice cut the air, brittle yet commanding. "Debt cannot buy dragons." Silence smothered protest. Bran's eyes glowed faint silver. "Price of fire is paid in ash, not gold. Offer else or return south." The factor's throat worked. She pivoted to Sansa. "Lady Stark, you know hunger's bite. Surely pragmatic rule." "Pragmatism kept the Boltons in Winterfell," Sansa answered, voice glacial. "The realm will not pawn tomorrow's hope for today's coin." The factor swallowed ire. "Iron Bank always collects." Daenerys stepped forward, face mild yet deadly calm. "So it shall, when harvests bloom and debts to the dead are settled. If you prefer sooner, sail west and seek Cersei." She fled with half the crown's vaults. "Present this council with proof of her demise and her plunder in your coffers, and we will speak of interest." The hall buzzed. The factor realized negotiation had shifted. She bowed shallow. "The bank will consider exceptional accommodations." She withdrew. Garland Tyrell exhaled. "They will return," he murmured, "but not soon." His eyes flicked to Sansa, gratitude wordless. Days slid into thaw weeks. With each sunrise, the dead smoldering heaps shrank. With each sunset, laughter leaked back among tents. Children born in the aftermath toddled between forges where iron sparks flew like fireflies. Dragons ranged wide wings to distant coasts, searing white nests unearthed by wildling scouts. Yet new tensions budded too. Supply wagons ambushed in the neck, their drivers whispering of shadowcats large as horses. A Dornish envoy found strangled near White Harbor, scorpion stinger lodged in his throat. Yet no scorpions lived in winter latitudes. One dawn Sansa rode with Brienne beyond the Wolfswood to survey farmland charred by wildfire months before. Shoots of barley poked through blackened loam, steam rising under thin snowpack. As they dismounted, a raven spiraled to Sansa's wrist, scroll twined in braided reed. She unfurled it and read Bran's round hand. Near the Valley of Shivering Stones, a tree of weirwood stands alone in ice field, older than songs. Dreamed voices plead, "Come see." Sansa glanced at Brienne. "Tell no guard. We ride light." They left horses at a hunter's lean-to, followed wolf tracks northward until pine gave way to barren waste. At horizon's edge rose a solitary weirwood, trunk pale as bone, its red leaves fallen yet preserved like frozen rose petals about the roots. Beneath its bleeding face lay a girl, no more than 10, wrapped in moss-weave cloak, skin mottled greenish gold, eyes shut. Sansa knelt, brushed frost from the child's brow. Eyes fluttered open, pupils silver flecked with amber. She spoke in the tongue of the children, a lilting rustle of leaves. When Sansa answered only in common, the girl closed her eyes again and whispered a single word any Northman would know. "Seed." Brienne scanned wind-scraped emptiness. "Why here?" Sansa lifted the child, surprised at her warmth amid cold air. "Because the realm must remember which roots gave birth to its leaves." She wrapped the little one in her cloak, felt tiny fingers clutch. They returned as dusk bled. Bran awaited at the gate, pale fire in his stare. "She is Elmshade," he said, "last seed of the singing glade people." The children scattered when dragonfire raised their groves in Aegon the Conqueror's age. She wandered centuries under glamour of bark and time. Now ice broken, she comes to grow anew. Sansa carried Elmshade into Winterfell's greenhouse, a new glass hall built by Tyrell craftsmen. There, among budding lemon trees, the child sighed deep, as though roots at last touched soil. Aegon's health improved. On the eve of first seed moon, he and Sansa stood upon Dawnspire's half-finished flank, surveying Carpenter's fit winches and Tyrell banners. Lanterns swung, painting flickers across his cheekbones. "Elmshade sings in the green hall," he said. "Her songs call mice from burrows, birds from rafters. Even Regal sits outside to listen." Sansa gazed northward. "She reminds us dragons once wounded more than men." Aegon's shoulders sagged. "I thought to heal by forging dawn. Yet each new dawn casts fresh shadow." She touched his hand. "Shadow is proof of light." Below, Daenerys supervised a trio of young stonemasons. Ghost and Drogon eyed each other like wary siblings. A hush fell when Elmshade emerged, barefoot upon the snowless garden path, her moss cloak trailing seed puffs. She lifted a small wooden flute, carved of weirwood branch gifted by Bran, and blew 3 notes. The sound drifted intangible yet potent. Workers froze, hearts tugged by half-remembered lullabies. Dragons tilted heads. Direwolves pricked ears. Elmshade stepped toward the base of Dawnspire, pressed her palm to the mortar between stones. The tower hummed. A low drone felt beneath ribs. Sprouts of pale green winked from mortar seams, tiny leaves unfurling into the chill. Gasps rippled. The child turned, eyes bright. She spoke again in the tongue of leaves. Bran, interpreting from his dais above, called down. "Stone drinks song. Root will climb spire, lending strength flexing like living bone. Tower shall bend, not break, when earth shakes." Murmurs swept the crowd. Wonder, reverence. Aegon brushed tears secretly. Sansa watched him, hope blooming like those vines. But winter's residue clung. Asha Greyjoy raided abandoned Lannister caravans near Maidenpool, claiming the spoils for pike. Garland Tyrell protested. Archers skirmished with Ironborn crossbowmen along the Blackwater Rush, leaving 3 dead. Daenerys flew to arbitrate but returned troubled. "The Reachfields starve," she warned Sansa. "Yet Asha hoards grain to trade for shipwrights. If we cannot feed both sea and land, they will bleed each other before next snow." Sansa weighed options with Bran and Davos. They dispatched envoys to Dorne, where water gardens flourished in captured aquifers, to barter citrus and dates for grain reserves. Yet word reached Winterfell that Dornish princes considered crowning Nyra Martell, rumored paramour to Sellsword captains of Carcosa, promising them footholds at Sunspear ports. Twilight's politics thickened like webbing. Under such pressure, Aegon summoned nightly councils, drafting Charter of the Dawn Assembly. 12 seats, each sworn to serve realm before region. The North, Reach, Vale, Iron Isles, Riverlands, Westerlands, Dorne, Crownlands claimed 8. Wildling freefolk, the Children, Citadel, and Faith were offered the rest. Each would have equal vote. Tie resolved by the holder of Ellery's, Warden, not King. Some balked. Jon Royce, proud of Vale's historic autonomy, argued that steel shoulders law, not talk. Garland feared small folk voice drowned. Septon Maribald welcomed the faith seat yet cautioned that God's law superseded mortal quorum. Debate blazed, spilled into taverns, sparred across training yards. Yet slowly consensus grew. After the Night King, none wished single rule capable of equal ruin. The night before ratification, Sansa dreamt she stood in Ned's crypt, his quiet face candle-lit. He spoke, "Justice is doing right even when duty screams otherwise." She woke pale, heart aching. At dawn, she donned wolf fur cloak and walked to the council tent. Aegon greeted her with weary smile. Daenerys nodded solemnly. One by one delegates signed the ivory charter with dragonglass stylus. When Asha Greyjoy's turn came, she hesitated, scanning clauses about free trade lanes and levy caps. Her jaw set. She inked a rough X. "So long as Pike's hulls roam free," she muttered. Garland signed smooth loops. Royce delivered scrawl like sword scratch.
Elmshada prasatum prin barkpala, sap smudging parkmen.
Last came Sansa. She lifted stylus, felt eyes of Hall upon her. Felt Bran's dream whispers, Ned's memory. She signed, then spoke clear. "Let this council stand not as cage but compass. If ever we forget why we gathered, dragons will darken sky and wolves will howl reminder." Applause rolled, ragged but sincere. Bran wheeled forward, placed Ellery's upon a stone dais. Dawn Assembly was born. Months slipped past. Summer's green-kissed northern hills overseas by hot winds, while Dawnspire reached full height, living vines interlaced with sky-forged stone. Sansa spent mornings adjudicating land claims for small folk displaced by blizzard, afternoons drilling archers on the Wolfswood Range, evenings reading with Aegon or walking gardens with Elmshade, learning the leaf speech. Yet undergrowth simmered unrest. 3 times the Banks factor returned, each with sterner letters. Dornish rebels seized a grain convoy near Storm's End. Rumors spread of a blonde queen raising sell-sail hordes on the stepstones. Cersei reinvented, some claimed. Others swore it was only a Lysene courtesan using the name to conjure fear. Sansa dismissed wild talk, until a raven bore sigil of a crowned golden sunflower, bearer Tycho Nestoris himself. It reported, Crown of Thorns fleet destroyed at Spicehead by Lioness Queen's war galleys, cargo of Reach seed lost, survivors ransomed for red gold. Council erupted. Garland slammed fist. Without those seeds, autumn will starve villages from Ashford to Rosby. Asha sneered. Seeds float poorly. Should have shipped by keel, not cart. Garland rose. Swords half drew. Sansa's bark shivered air. Hold! She rose, voice iron. We will salvage seed from Dornish stockpiles and Citadel stores. Davos will escort fleets through broken arm straits. Asha's ships will guard hulls. Reach men will load without levy. Anyone who fails this covenant is traitor to Dawn. Silence. Slowly heads bowed. That night she went alone to Godswood, knelt beneath blood-red leaves. Snow flurried, though season was midsummer. She whispered her fear that dawn might fracture like glass. Under too many hands. Wind answered through branches. A thrum like harpstrings, not quite words. Elmshade appeared, tiny hand resting upon heart tree trunk. Roots thirst, she murmured in leaf speech. Sansa understood. Realm needs deeper drink, not broader river. How? Elmshade stretched her arm. A sapling sprouted where snow touched root. Grow slow, she said in broken common. tapping Sansa's chest. Heartwood before hedge. Sansa looked to Dawnspire, vines swaying. She saw. They were building sky towers while small folk still sheltered in burned barns. She bowed head. We grow too high too quick. She came before council next dawn. Robes travel-worn, hair unbraided. I leave Winterfell for 8 weeks, she declared. Daenerys will co-chair. Bran will counsel. I ride the King's Road to see charred villages, river crossings, small folk camps. Dawn Assembly writes laws, so we must know those governed. Aegon stood at once. You do not ride alone. She lifted hand. One queen's absence is crisis. 2 leaves vacuum. Remain, govern. My escort is Brienne and Lyanna and 2 watchful wolves. That suffices. Aegon's protest died beneath her firm gaze. He nodded. Send ravens nightly. So Sansa set forth. Ghost and a new she-wolf pup named Ember padded ahead. They rode through Carhold, where charred keeps now bristled with fresh timber. Through the Gift, where Night's Watch farmers plowed thawed earth, wary of wild boar packs drawn south by heat. She ate porridge with orphan children in mud-brick longhouses. She listened to widows recount dreams where their husbands still tended nets along ice rivers. She settled border disputes, paid for a shepherd's lost flock, mediated scuffles between free folk hunters and northern trappers. At each village, she gathered scribes' rolls of grievances and hopes. One dusk near Last Hearth's ruins, Sansa stood upon blackened battlements watching sunset bleed crimson. Brienne fetched her parchment. Sansa unfurled and read a raven from Winterfell. Lioness Queen sails north. Last sight at Sisterton, burning granaries. Dawn Assembly divided on intercept. Aegon wonders. When does mercy end? She folded parchment, wind cold on cheeks. Ember whined at her heel. Sansa felt weight of 2 worlds again. Mercy and blade. Ned's specter whispered. Bran's comets crossed. She knew decision approached like frost. At campfire she wrote reply. Mercy ends where justice begins. Justice begins where children bleed. Intercept fleet. Offer surrender. Should they refuse, sink them. Spare sailors who yield.
Feed prisoners.
The realm must fear Dawn's wrath yet trust its hand. She sealed wax with wolf, handed to Ravenkeeper. Stars overhead shimmered twin tails crossing. A question answered. Winterfell's harbor glowed when she returned 6 weeks later. 100 ships moored. Reach grain cogs, ironborne longships, Dornish triremes flying banners of truce. Aegon met her at Castle Gate, face tired but eyes bright. We faced her, he said. Not Cersei, one Jane Lothston styling herself lioness, hiding behind Lannister banners. Fleet refused parley. We burned masts at Sisterton Shoal. Survivors taken, children among them. He led her to Jailer Yard, where cots held half-starved sailors. Citadel healers tended wounds. Dornish cooks ladled stew. Sansa knelt by one small boy, hair singed. She offered spoon, he sipped, eyes darting. She saw ash where innocence should dwell. She rose, jaw set. We feed them, clothe them, send them south under Tyrell escort with proof of Dawn's mercy. But we also send message. Next who flies false banners has no quarter. Aegon's shoulders eased. Council aligns. He handed her vellum, a charter revision strengthening maritime law, bolstering small folk representation. She signed. As summer waned, Elmshade's vines flowered along Dawnspire, white blossoms releasing perfumes so sweet ravens cooed drowsy in mid-flight. Children gathered petals. Bran smiled rarely. Daenerys opened new dragon mews carved from living rock, painted with runes to calm hatchlings. Garland's archers taught freefolk fletching. Asha's reavers taught reach men reef knot craft. Slowly suspicion loosened, replaced by wary respect. Finally, one crisp dawn, Sansa and Aegon climbed Dawnspire's crown, where a viewing platform jutted above sea of pines. Frost-jeweled rail. Far east, sunrise set clouds aflame. Rhaegal and Drogon wheeled overhead, silhouettes black against gold. Aegon drew breath of cold. We have built scaffold of peace, yet storms brew always. Sansa placed hand on his. Scaffolds can be strengthened, foundations laid. Elmshade says heartwood grows within stone now. He lifted her hand, pressed lips to knuckles. Will you marry me beneath heart tree, not as crown but covenant? Let wolves and dragons entwine for generations. Tears stung. She recalled suffering, losses, the long path to this height. She nodded. Yes, because fall may come, and winter after, but we will build hearth enough for all. They embraced as sunlight spilled across battlements, igniting dawnspire blossoms. Ghost raised muzzle and howled. Ember joined, her pup voice high. Wolf's song blended with dragon's roar, chord of stone and root and sky. Below, the realm stirred awake. Farmers stretching, smiths stoking fires, children chasing each other with bright laughter. Unaware, they stood poised upon the fragile cusp of a history newly forged yet ancient as ice and fire. And somewhere deep in Weirwood dreams, Bran watched comets part. He saw green shoots pierce ruins, saw dragons perch upon towers alive with vine, saw direwolf pups gnawing on sticks while wildling girls plaited barley doll hair. He also saw shadows beyond sunset. Yet for this breath, dawn held. The sagas would call this moment the quiet bloom, when Pact of Dragon and Direwolf seated an age not of conquering, nor of false peace, but of patient growth measured in rings of heartwood and careful hatchling steps upon castle walls. Many songs would follow, of wars rekindled, ambitions tested, heroes risen and fallen. But all traced roots to the night two scarred souls clasped hands beneath a god tree and vowed to grow slow, to mend before building tall, to remember winter and still choose spring. For now, high on Dawnspire crowned in living vine, they watched the sun tip over the world, and they believed, truly, that dawn might endure. Snowmelt trickled in silver threads down Winterfell's stone gutters, murmuring of the slow surrender of summer into a restless, amber-tinged autumn. Fields beyond the walls, once blackened by wildfire and clawed by war, now shimmered with ripening barley. The green blades swayed like an inland sea, stippled by poppies as red as rubbed garnet. Yet splendor could not wholly mask the nervous rhythm pulsing at the edge of dawn's fragile peace. A harried raven arrived from the east shortly past first light, its message sealed with dull yellow wax and stamped not by sigil but by a crude sunburst burned into parchment. Sansa read the lines in the small council chamber as Aegon, Daenerys, Bran, and Garland Tyrell gathered around the map table. The letter reeked of smoke and brine, its ink hurried and raw, chains end fallen. Lioness now holds both Stepstone's forts. Mercy offered once, answered with pitch and flame. Refugees flee by the thousands. If dawn will stand, it must strike before night returns. A hush settled thicker than dust. Bran's gaze lost focus, pupils swirling pale. The sea churns red, he said, voice hollow. Sails black as spilled ink draw nearer, too many for one prow to carve. Aegon exchanged a look with Daenerys. Neither needed translation. A fleet mast, sails dyed to hide blood spatters. Garland's jaw tightened. Tyrell grain ships outbound to Dorne must pass Stepstones. If Lioness holds both forts, she commands chokehold on the narrow sea. We cannot starve half our realm, Daenerys murmured. But Storm's End garrisons are still rebuilding and Dragonstone's docks lie shallow for large troop transports. Sansa rested her fingertips on the weathered wood. Then Dawn assembly deploys wings, not hulls. Dragons strike, wolves follow. She looked to Aegon. We must dislodge her forts before frost sets iron across the sea lanes. Aegon's cheeks still bore faint frost scars from the Night King's blade, but his eyes burned bright. Rhaegal and Drogon can sweep ramparts, burn nothing beyond stone. But ground force must seize gates. Lyanna Mormont, standing near the doorway in polished bear steel, stepped forward. Give Bear Island spears the vanguard. We will climb their bastards' walls whether the stones burn or freeze. Tormund, lounging against a pillar with a grin wide enough to crack bone, slapped her shoulder. And free folk will follow, hooting like crows on a gut pile. We've no fondness for cell sails in black armor. Bran's eyelids fluttered, then steadied. One warning. Under the fort's granite lie labyrinths from Valyrian quarry days. Shadows twist there. I taste blood older than the doom, trapped like sour smoke. If the lioness seeks sorcery, she hides it in that bedrock. Sansa nodded grimly. We fight in daylight, torch tunnels, salt the earth if we must. Her gaze turned to Elmshade, perched silent beside a window's sunbeam. The girl of the children studied them with calm clarity far older than her years. She spoke leaf speech. Bran translated. Root's memory says dark stone drinks flame, thirst never sated. Carry ironwood stakes soaked in sap of ghostgrass. Shadow cannot drink that fire. So armed with prophecy and stratagem, the new alliance prepared its first true war of dawn. 3 days later, Winterfell's courtyard roared with the clamor of mustering. Smiths strapped ironwood stakes to bundles of dragonglass pikes. Mormont's spearmen drilled shield wall formations beside wildling raiders practicing scale wall ascents with ice axes. Sansa oversaw supply wagons, salt pork, oat cakes, barrels of honey water brewed for long voyages, while Aegon tested Regal's healing wing beats overhead. Daenerys' presence hummed like a storm about to break. She strode the yard in scaled cuirass, pale braids fluttering, directing Dothraki riders now sworn to Dawn's banner. Brienne approached, helm beneath arm. The Steelcatcher captains have sworn to transport 300 Northmen and 200 free folk, she reported. Their longships ride low with reach grain but promise a fast crossing. Sansa sighed. We must risk overlapping cargoes. The sooner forts fall, the sooner seed reaches Pluffman. Her gaze drifted to a distant cluster of children chasing each other between newly planted apple saplings. Winter's memory still lingered in the aches of her bones, yet life's insistence on growth persisted. That night she convened with Aegon beneath the heart tree. Ravens rustled in branches. Moonlight poured silver ribbons across the snowless floor. They knelt facing one another, hands entwined. The road ahead is clawed with unknowns, she whispered. Promise me, whichever of us walks it first waits on the crest for the other. Aegon brushed her cheek with calloused thumb. When dawn first broke, you stitched my wounds. When dusk falls, your voice will guide me back. He kissed her, taste of ash and honey on his lips. Ghost huffed soft approval. Regal circled overhead as though lending dragon blessing. The fleet sailed south through calm seas streaked with migrating moonlight. Regal and Drogon soared wingtip to wingtip above, their shadows racing across rolling swells. On deck Lyanna paced between bare islanders, eyes bright. Tormund told ribald tales that drew reckless laughter from Valemen archers unused to wildling humor. Sansa stood at prow with Brienne, wind tangling her copper hair, cloak snapping. Far ahead, stepstones rose like jagged teeth breaking the horizon. Forts perched sentinel on twin cliffs of black basalt. At dawn's first blush Regal screamed. Drogon answered deeper. Dragon's dove, flames painting sunrise orange. Fort ramparts erupted in bursts of basalt dust as stone melted from draconic breath. Yet defenders fought fiercely. Scorpion bolts hissed skyward, some gray scoring Regal's flank. Sansa's heart punched her ribs, but the dragon banked, fury blooming in emerald fire that consumed a ballista tower. Longships grounded in narrow coves under cover of smoke. Mormont's spears formed wedge, Lyanna at tip, while wildlings and Dothraki fanned both flanks. They charged up scree slopes slick with dew and ash. Ironwood stakes bore ghostgrass flame, blue-white tongues licking air as they advanced. Gate staves slammed. Ironclad cell sails poured murder holes with oil. Yet Tormund's raiders scaled side walls using grapnels, tossing dragonglass bombs over battlements. Sansa, sword drawn, led a detachment of Vale knights through a breach Regal had gouged. The air inside reeked of sulfur and char steel rang. Sparks flew. She met a captain in gilded Morian helm, struck his blade aside, pivoted, and rammed Lady's Echo through chain links, bronze runes blazing with heart tree light. He collapsed, eyes wide at the strange flame. A corridor slanted into the labyrinth Bran foresaw. Sansa signaled Brienne. They descended with torches wrapped in ghost grass-soaked cloth. The stone breathed heat like a furnace. Walls seeped black moisture. Deeper still, the air trembled with faint metallic clinks. A forge? or chains. They entered a cavern where veins of fused obsidian laced the floor. In its center, a massive iron cage housed two gaunt shapes: a wyvern hatchling, scales dull crimson, and a direwolf pup no older than 3 months, white fur matted with soot. The creatures cowered but pressed flank to flank through the bars. Shackles glimmered between them, linking paw to claw, dragon to wolf in parody of Pact. A woman stood beyond, clad in tarnished plate etched with lion sigils partly hammered out. Blonde hair fell ragged, her smile sliced thin as razor blade. "Welcome, Lady Sansa," she purred. "Did you think the realm yours uncontested?" Sansa lifted sword. "You are no lion queen. Release them." The impostor, Jane Lothston the lioness, laughed hollow. "I require but one thing: surrender of the Dawn Assembly. Dawn is fickle, night offers certainty. Give me Winterfell and the dragons, and I will let new dawn rise under my banner." Brienne stepped forward, shield raised. "You hold starving beasts hostage. You'll find Dawn's teeth sharper than your threat." Jane brandished an obsidian dagger molten at edge. "I bled witches in Volantis to craft this. One slice frees an ancient curse. Dragon and wolf, bound twin hearts of your fragile peace. Once severed, your realm fractures." Sansa's pulse drummed. She recalled Elmshade's warning: dark stone drinks flame. The cavern's obsidian would absorb dragon fire. Any misaim could roast prisoners. She sheathed sword slowly, raised empty hands. "Take me as hostage. Free them." Brienne hissed protest, but Sansa's glance silenced her. Jane's eyes narrowed. "A queen for a wolf? Paltry swap." "A queen for 2 symbols of dawn," Sansa corrected. "More than you possess." Outside, faint tremors shook dust from stalactites. Regal's roar reverberating through bedrock. Jane flicked glance upward. Tormund's warhorn boomed. Decision flashed in her eyes. She stepped to the cage, keys jingling. "Open chains," she ordered a cell's word. He twisted bolts. Shackles clanged free. Wyvern hissed. Direwolf snarled but did not bolt. Jane shoved gate. Creatures stumbled out, confusion tilting heads. Sansa lowered to knee, murmured soft north words. The direwolf pup crept, sniffed her palm. Its eyes burned ember gold. She lifted it gently. The wyvern shuffled close, exhaling smoky cough. Jane gestured. "Now your turn." She produced thin manacles set with obsidian shards. Sansa rose, handing pup to Brienne. "Take them. Flee tunnels." She extended wrists. Brienne's voice cracked. "I will not leave." "You will," Sansa commanded, steel in tone. "Dawn must live if I fall." Brienne clasped her forearm, then retreated, wolf and wyvern in arms. Jane snapped shackles around Sansa's wrists, shards biting flesh with cold fire. "The realm will see who holds true power," she hissed. Sudden quake rattled cavern. Ceiling fissures tore. Molten rock dripped. Regal burst through archway, wings battering air into maelstrom. Drogon's silhouette loomed behind, throat glowing furnace bright. Jane's cell's words fled. Jane shrieked, dragging Sansa toward a rear passage. Sansa twisted, ramming shoulder into her captor's chest. The obsidian dagger flew, skittered across glassy floor. Jane clawed for Sansa's throat, yet the shackles between wrists snapped like baked clay, obsidian shards crumbling. Elmshade's sap-soaked stakes burned ghost grass blue in barrels nearby. Their heat had weakened curse-forged iron. Sansa wrenched free, seized the dagger. Jane lunged. Sansa ducked, slashed upward. Edge-kissed mail sliced through gorget, nicked flesh. Jane staggered, roaring. Above, Regal unleashed a targeted jet of flame that danced across ceiling, melting stalactites and showering sparks but sparing women below. Jane's eyes widened as obsidian rain hissed around her. She turned to flee, but Drogon's bulk blocked escape. He bared fangs, nostrils blasting hot wind. Jane froze, caught between dragon and burning ceiling. Sansa spoke, voice low. "The realm will outlive tyrants." She struck, burying dagger beneath Jane's breastplate. The lioness gasped, firelight reflected in her fading gaze. Blood pooled black on obsidian. She toppled. A hush fell as dragons snuffed flame, lowering massive heads to nuzzle Sansa, inhaling her scent to confirm she stood whole. She touched Regal's warm snout, gratitude flickering in her smile. Outside, the fort's defenders surrendered under combined onslaught. Lyanna hoisted Dawnwolf banner above battered tower. Tormund roared victory. Grain convoys sailed through liberated straits within the week, escorted by Ironborn and Reach galleys flying joint colors. Winterfell welcomed the returning host with harvest festival. Long trestle tables groaned under roasted boar, honeyed carrots, and berry wines. Musicians played fiddles and hammered dulcimers while free folk taught Tyrell ladies circle dances. Even stoic Elmshade laughed shyly as children wove flower crowns for her moss hair. In the Godswood, beneath torchlit boughs, Aegon and Sansa wed. Bran officiated, speaking words older than Undul's, woven with Valyrian intonations. Regal and Drogon perched above ramparts, trumpeting thunderous cries when vows exchanged. Direwolves howled chorus. The rescued pup, now named Snowflame, bounding around their feet, Wyvern perched on a branch, iridescent wings flicking. Guests watched as Aegon placed a simple ring of living vine and silver around Sansa's finger. She gifted him a torque of black iron set with dawnstone carved into intertwined wolf and dragon. Elmshade sprinkled powdered heartwood, fragrant as cedar and cloves, upon the couple's clasped hands. As feast spilled into night, torches lit Dawnspire's vines. Blossoms opened, releasing luminescent pollen that drifted like golden snowflakes. People gasped at the spectacle. Stories spread that Weirwood itself blessed the union. Brienne, smiling rare and wide, danced with Davos while Tormund attempted to twirl Lyanna, earning a punch to ribs and uproarious laughter. Garland toasted absent Maester Wolkan, busy compiling annals of Dawn's founding, and pledged barrels of Arbor Red for next festival. Even Asha raised horn of fermented goat milk to the newlyweds, proclaiming that if Realm produced more nights like this she might retire piracy for farming. Then promptly refuted by her loud guffaw. Deep into revelry, Bran wheeled to Sansa's side. "Comets cross again," he whispered, two tails now braided, sigil of union. He pressed small carved token into her palm. A twin-headed beast, half wolf, half dragon, tails entwined around blooming branch. She kissed his forehead. When moon reached zenith, Sansa and Aegon slipped away to Dawnspire's summit. Wind tugged her hair, his cloak flapped. Below, campfires patterned constellations across fields. She leaned into his chest, listening to steady heartbeat. "What troubles you?" he murmured against her temple. "Nothing, yet everything," she exhaled. "We have peace, but I feel the world's breath quicken, as though bracing." "Peace is a garden," he said. "It requires constant tending." He traced her vine ring. "We will prune threats, nurture hope." She smiled sadly. "Gardens still face frost." He tipped her chin. "Then our oath is fire to warm them." He kissed her slow, sure. Sparks from Dawnspire vines drifted around like golden fireflies. Dragons rumbled approval. Direwolves howled harmony. And somewhere beyond horizon's curve, on the ghost winds of a continent that had tasted dawn's light only to hunger for shadows, a different choir answered. Deep horns echoing across steppe, banners taut with promise of conquest. Yet for one long breath, ice and fire, wolf and dragon, man and child of forest stood in uncommon accord beneath stars, forging heartwood before hedge, roots before reach, slow growth against the hurry of ruin. So the first year of dawn assembly closed not in thunder of siege engines or wail of widows, but in laughter, harvest, and vows whispered beneath weirwood leaves glistening with dew of living sap. Histories would chart many storms ahead, rebellions of bruised pride, plagues stirred by melting permafrost, intrigues coiling through chanceries. But all would trace their beginning to this quiet bloom, this night of gold pollen and vine-lit tower where two scarred hearts believed dawn might endure if tended with vigilance and grace. And as long as they kept watch, dragons over sky and direwolves over earth, dawn's fragile flame burned on.